Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Tough Symphonies, Part 1. This is going to be a multi-episode chat that we'll do over the next 300 or 400 years. But first, I have to introduce you to my new friend. This is Fred, the Earth Gong. Actually, Fred is a tam-tam, but gong and tam-tam are sometimes used synonymously, and in this case they are. Now, this guy, as opposed to most of the other ones you've seen were made by Wuhan, or in Wuhan, China, and one of them was a UFIP made in Pistoia, Italy, but this is a Paisti tam-tam, and Paisti tam-tams are usually not my preferred tam-tams for symphonic purposes, for the simple reason, and I'll show you one at some point in the future when we'll use a symphonic tam-tam, because they have a very, very long, drawn-out reverb, which is okay. I mean, it's nice for certain things, but they're best for big, loud swats. So it's soft dynamic levels. They tend to be rather difficult to hear, and they take a very, very long time to speak. And even though usually tam-tam strokes tend to be on the long side, music is deceptive. Even a slow tempo, quite a slow tempo, really is only usually a beat is much less than a second. And so for a tam-tam beat that lasts a couple of seconds, you have a tam-tam that takes 10 seconds to build up a wealth of tone. And so paistas are not really that good for that purpose. However, there is always an exception. And way back in the day, when I was just a kid percussionist, just starting out, I was fetching about paista tam-tams. And my dear friend Barry at Drummers World on 46th Street actually spoke to the paista people, and they sent me a very large one of these, which I still have. This is a 32. They sent me a 38. This is called a sound creation gong. They are a special line of tam-tams, actually, because they're not pitched, and they're designed to make a somewhat darker sound, and they look really cool too. Look at the way that this is hand hammered. They're beautifully made. But listen to what it does. It has a very, very different tone from the Wuhans that we've been hearing. Cool, huh? But see how long this lasts? But at least these they speak immediately. They don't take forever before you get a sound out of them. And if you hit them hard, I mean, they really are. They're just amazing. I mean, they're quite a very loud and splashy and always metallic. Paistas have a metallic tone. Hit me in the back there. It stopped it from quite coming out. Let's try it again and see if I can get out of the way. Okay. All right, you get it. Fascinating instrument. Absolutely fascinating instrument. Beautiful instrument. And I think the jewel of the Paista catalog. And the problem is that most symphonic performers don't use them in symphonic music, which is ridiculous. You should. They should. I used this at Carnegie Hall in a performance of Scheherazade, and let me tell you, when that shipwrecked, it was spectacular. It was fabulous, because you don't have to hit it that hard, and you get a wonderful, splashy sound. It was just spectacular. So, there you are, the Paista Sound Creation Earth Gong. First-rate musical instrument. Now, let's start talking about tough symphonies. What are tough symphonies? I'm talking about symphonies that are hard, tough, that are hard to listen to. They are atonal, they are gnarly, they are dissonant, they are pieces of music and I'm talking about music by genuine symphonists. Not just like one that came along somehow by a guy who did other things. I mean composers who are legitimate symphonists, who understood what the symphonic project was, which is to somehow encapsulate human experience and to do it in terms of their own personal language. And in this case, that personal language happens to be either avant-garde or technically very complex or 12-tone or atonal, whatever it is. And they wrote wonderful, wonderful symphonies, but they take a little work from you, the listener. And so I'm going to be talking about a whole series of these things in groups of 3 for the most part, because I think that makes the most sense, because I don't want to just like make long lists. I want to be able to play samples wherever possible and give you an idea of what they sound like and who these composers are, because they wrote wonderful, wonderful music. And there are moments when, I don't know about you, when I just feel like a nice, nasty, meaty, complicated, difficult, sink your teeth into, chew on a bone type symphony. And that's what these are. That's what these are. They have their place in our world of musical experience, and it's an honored one, because these guys are real symphonists. Because you see, the key is not, it doesn't matter whether it's tonal or atonal or too melodic or not melodic or whatever it is. What matters, in my point of view anyway, is whether or not these composers are able to use their language, their personal language, to encapsulate a sequence of moods which they then organize in an expressive arc that makes sense as a coherent whole. I guess that's kind of what symphonies are. I mean, nowadays a symphony is anything anyone calls it, but they've always meant some sort of experiential completeness and contrast and variety in whatever kind of style or idiom the composer adopts. So let's get to the first 3. We're going to start with, I don't know who to start with. They're all so interesting here. Roger Sessions. Oh, yes, Roger Sessions, the American composer. Actually, we have 2 American composers in this talk. Roger Sessions began life as sort of a neoclassicist, and then he was kind of a chromaticist, modernist kind of type. And then eventually he started writing 12-tone music completely. Now, Sessions claimed he never wrote a melody he couldn't sing, which means he must have had one hell of a voice, because some of these tunes are not so singy. But his music, I think, is wonderful. It is lean and athletic and muscular and gnarly. And he's not one of those guys who writes atonal music that just kind of lays there. You know what I mean? It doesn't go anywhere. It just sits there and snaps and snarls at you. And he wrote 9 symphonies, the magic number. And this is his 4th. It's on New World, coupled with the 5th and the Rhapsody for Orchestra. They've all been recorded, but not all equally well, and not all of them are always available. They're not popular works. They never will be, but they deserve to be well recorded once at least, I think. Herbert Blomstedt in San Francisco did a fabulous number 2. There was a very good number 3 with Igor Bukatov on RCA in their Modern Music series, which is really lovely to see completely, revamped and reissued by RCA, like the Modern Music series that was on Sony, that was on Columbia. That would really be fun. The Fromm Foundation series, whatever that was. But this is a really, really good disc on New World Records that makes a wonderful introduction to the later, gnarlier sessions. Number 2, the one that Blomstedt did, is a lot easier to listen to. It's kind of like atonal Copeland. It's very interesting. It's obviously American sounding, but obviously modern and obviously in a more international style. It's really kind of cool. But the 4th symphony has 3 movements, and they're given titles which really give you a key as to how to triangulate emotional expression a la Sessions, because make no mistake, his music is quite expressive, and once you know that, not hard to take it all. It's just as challenging. It begins with a burlesque, then there's an elegy, and the finale is a pastoral. What could be wrong? What could be difficult? You just have to know that's what they are, and then listen to this entirely personal expression of those feelings or moods. And so here is a bit of the opening burlesque I mean, what's not to love about a burlesque? Now, this is not the kind of burlesque where you don't exactly see, the garter belts flying into the audience. It's not that sort of burlesque. It's more like the rondo burlesque from Mahler's Ninth. That kind of burlesque, a piece of music that's sardonic and somewhat bitter with a bit of an edge. Oh, it's wonderful. So here is the burlesque, a bit of it anyway, from the first movement of Session Symphony No. 5 with the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Christian Badea. First-class music. But, as I said, tough. Not easy to get to, perhaps, at first hearing, but I've enjoyed this disc for many, 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 many years. And, it just has a certain bracing acerbity that I really like. It's like, sucking on a lemon. It has tartness, and I find it refreshing. I really do. So next, after Sessions, let's talk about George Rockberg. Rockberg was, had his 15 minutes of fame before he passed away about 20 years ago or 30 years ago, because he very, very famously began life as an avant-garde serialist or an academic serialist, and then decided after the death of his son that was not the kind of music he wanted to write, and he began to write neo-romantic music that was still quite tough. I mean, he's no slouch. And he wrote 6 symphonies, 6 really powerful symphonies. Not all of them have been recorded yet, I don't believe. 2 of them, at least, numbers 2 and 5, are on Naxos in these absolutely fabulous performances with Christopher Linden Guy and the Saarbrücken Radio Symphony Orchestra. These are marvelous. It's such a shame this series hasn't been completed. I still hope perhaps sometime it will be. Now, the second symphony, which was composed, 1955-56, this was the last of his big atonal pieces, 12-note pieces. And it is, I think, one of the things I pointed out when I reviewed this originally on ClassicsToday.com is that the reason that Rockberg sort of gave up writing just atonal music is because he wanted to be more expressive, more expressively comprehensive to the listener, to the audience. And so I think he also realized that 12-note music, or strictly 12-note music, is best suited to the expression of pain and suffering and misery. And he wanted to, in his own personal language, of course, to do more. Because as we've just heard, Sessions manages to take 12-tone music and do a burlesque and a pastoral and an elegy, and you can do anything with it. But for Rockberg, he needed to go beyond that and explore more traditional means of expression and a wider range of emotional states. And he felt that particular technique, the way he used it, could give him and his music. But the second symphony is just one of the best 12-tone symphonies you've ever heard in your life. It's about 31 minutes long in multiple sections. And, the one thing that really makes this work is that it has rhythm. It really does. It's exciting music, quite often exciting music, and very heartfelt music too, and it's slow movement. But one of the problems with a lot of avant-garde music is that it depends on how avant you want to be. For example, you can write 12-tone music and give up traditional harmony or traditional melody, but you can keep rhythm, you can keep color, you can keep all kinds of things. One of the problems with the extreme avant-garde is that they give up everything. They wind up writing music which is wholly negative. It doesn't have rhythm. It doesn't have interesting color or texture or harmony or melody, it winds up being a catalog of things that it is not. And that's a real problem. But most composers, of course, understand that if you give up one thing, you really ought to compensate with some of the others. And so here is a bit of the opening, which is marked declamando, which is declamation, declaratory, from the George Rockberg Symphony No. 1 with the Saarbrücken Radio Symphony and Christopher Linden Guy on Naxos. And you really, really, really hear, I think, this intensely expressive music that's only going to become more so in the following symphonies. And you really owe it to yourself to hear Rockberg's orchestral music and his string quartets, and really, really fine stuff. He was a wonderful composer. So here is Symphony No. 2 by Rockberg. See what I mean? Wonderful stuff. Absolutely wonderful stuff. And last but not least, a composer who is very near and dear to my heart, and a major 20th century symphonist, I think, and composer that everybody ought to know because his music is just completely special and expressive and marvelous. And that's the Turkish composer Ahmed Adnan Saygun. Here he is. He's a wonderful composer, and he wrote 5 terrific symphonies, and a couple of string concertos, and a couple of piano concertos, and a bunch of other orchestral works, and one of the great national oratorios of Turkey, which we don't have to get into right now. He just was a wonderful composer. He assisted Hindemith when Hindemith was doing his ethnomusicological research in Turkey for a while, which he did as he was, sort of making his way out of Nazi Germany towards other things in the 1930s. Saygun's years, let me see what they were here, were, 1907 to 1991. And his music is tough music. There's no question about it. It's not, supposedly it's almost romantic nationalist, but it's more than that. It's modernist nationalist is what it is. It takes its hints a little bit from Hindemith, perhaps a little bit of Bartók, that kind of spiky nationalism that makes no compromises. It's not cute music. It's not adorable, fluffy, nationalist Turkish folk tunes. There is some of that in there, and you can tell that you can tell it has that flavor. But it also is just amazingly sophisticated, fantastically colored orchestrally. I just love the sound of his orchestra, the way he uses the orchestra. And the great work here on this disc, this is Symphonies 3 and 5. Number 5, by the way, was performed actually live, believe it or not. Leon Botstein did it. I think it was with the American Symphony or with the Orchestra Now. One of those groups at Carnegie Hall a couple of years ago before COVID. Fantastic concert of modernist symphonies. It was really a wonderful, wonderful program. And they did this Fifth Symphony. And I think everyone was very pleasantly surprised because it is gnarly, difficult music. It is not conventionally melodic, but it is tremendously exciting and evocative and provocative, and nowhere more so than in the scherzo of Symphony Number 3. Symphony Number 3 is a masterpiece. It's absolutely a fabulous piece. I played a little bit of it. If you go listen to it, if you're a Classics Today insider, you can hear some of this. This is the Staatsphilharmonie Rheinland-Pfalz with Ari Rossalainen conducting on CPO. A wonderful series. They've done all the major Saygun orchestral pieces, I think, and on like 5 or 6 discs, and you should really, really grab them, because especially his viola concerto. All of these composers, by the way, before we get to this, I just want to say, we will do talks on many of them personally, because I just want to give you a taste now. But it doesn't make any sense to just do one thing and then forget about them. You have to be persistent. If any of these composers, whether they're tough composers or easy composers, are going to get into the repertoire, they need repetition. They need to get regular exposure. So I do plan to do more, but right now, when I'm only working on my first 700 or so videos, we're just dipping our toes in, and we'll get into the nitty gritty, the meat and potatoes of each composer as new recordings come out, of course, and as we have an opportunity to do things more extensively, and as I get hopefully more permission to play samples for you and things like that, because just talking is worthless. You have to be able to listen. So here is a bit of the trio of the scherzo from Saygun Symphony Number 3, and this is quite wonderful in a way that I can't even begin to describe. I don't know whether it's Turkish or cabaret or I don't know, but it is a remarkable piece of music. Here you go. That was Ari Rossalainen with the Staatsphilharmonie Rheinland-Pfalz on CPO, doing Ahmed, Adnan, Saygun's Symphony Number 3. Turkey's really Turkey's great 20th century composer. He's just one of anybody's great 20th century composers. The guy could really write music. So I hope that you have enjoyed this opportunity to listen to 3 tough symphonists. 3 symphonists who challenge you, who tickle your eardrums, who are provocative and difficult and thorny, but refreshing and original and personal and expressive. And if you give them the time and attention that they deserve, they will reward you. And there will be more to come. I guarantee it. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me so much. Take care.